welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're doing a recap and review of Married at First Sight Unfiltered Broken Vows. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications. If you like the video, hit that like button, and also feel free to drop a comment down in the comment section below because I like to engage with my viewers and subscribers. So without further ado, let's jump into this video. So Jamie starts out by introducing this week's unfiltered guests, which is Clara, Haileys, and Virginia, talking about married life and their move-ins this week. So on the latest episode, they started talking about how Chris revealed to his friends already that he wanted a divorce, and his friends seemed like they wanted him to fix his marriage. And this is, of course, where we see the pastor saying how Paige is a diamond and, that diamonds are rare and that he needs to consider everybody's feelings involved. And Chris said, with all due respect, I'm already done with the conversation. And, at this point, of course, we saw both the pastor and Chris's friend pretty much looking at him and wondering why he didn't want to pursue this further. And the fact that what we seen in the episode is how Chris had pretty much checked out of the conversation. So then it goes back to Unfiltered, where Clara gives her take on the clip. And her perspective is, she said that we know Paige is such a warrior and an absolute diamond, as they said. And she didn't like seeing that his friends could see how amazing that she was. But Chris, par for the course, did not see it as well. Clara thinks that Chris' decision after 3 weeks of wanting a divorce speaks to his character. Clearly didn't make the vows that you said serious, is what Clara said. And imagining bringing all these people in his life into something like this and saying these things in front of family, friends, and God, that he puts God on a pedestal, and then 3 weeks later he says pretty much, I'm good. Haileys is also having problems in her marriage. Jamie asked, is she thinking about divorce? And Haileys said, yeah, we got a few problems, but at the end of the day, we're committed to seeing this through. So I don't want to say that we're giving up necessarily. We're figuring it out and trying to see through the process. And then, of course, this is where we saw Virginia. She chimed in and said that divorce tends to be the absolute end. And then Clara also said that when you have so many resources, divorces can seem really extreme and a last-ditch effort. So Jamie said that Chris's friends weren't the only one trying to talk some sense into the newlyweds last week. Haileys' friend also talked about her marriage with her. And, of course, Haileys loves her friends and they're great. But the conversation was pretty interesting, if you guys remember. So Jamie brings up the clip where we see Haileys talking to her friend, telling her that the excitement of the wedding wore off. And they were starting to get to know each other a little bit better, but it was too much for her. And she started backing off. And her friend asked her, well, what made you pull back? And she says that his obsessions with the 80s, he brought these goofy clothes to wear on your honeymoon. And she was like, who wears this type of stuff on your honeymoon? And the friend was like, okay, so what else? Because all I'm hearing is that he just doesn't dress well and you don't like his style. And of course, Jamie was like, you got a real good girlfriend. But Haileys said, hey, if I want to know the truth, she's the one that hands it to me straight. And she asked, what do you think about what she had to say here? And she said, well, I can't say that, her advice was wrong. She knows that I'm different in relationships and whatnot. And I definitely, had to take her advice to heart. And with her saying that, of course, Jamie asked her, is the 80s a really big deal to you, or are you just using this excuse as why you're not feeling him? And Haileys said, he does have an obsession with the 80s, but that's not the only reason why I'm not feeling the connection. I think I've got personalities issues with him because we're drastically different. I don't understand his sense of humor. I'm not connecting with him on that level. And it's just a huge miss to me. So, I mean, the 80s things is just, I think, the surface of the thing with Haileys. She got a lot of other things that are just not clicking for her when it comes to that. So Jamie asked, hey, Virginia, you and Eric had issues about guy friends. Did you get past this? And do you have any advice for Haileys? And, Virginia says, Eric and I aren't necessarily haven't gotten really over the guy friend thing. It's still a constant conversation. I just think the biggest thing is finding those things that you're similar, that you have in common with, and having a common basic level that you can build a friendship and enjoy each other on a daily basis. And it's going to be like one step forward moving in your relationship. So Jamie asked Clara, what would you do if you were in Haileys' position? And she said, well, the biggest thing is having a no pressure conversation where you don't feel the weight of the marriage is riding on this. She says, I think that it can build a friendship. I think once you build that friendship, then you can, kind of move forward and go further than that. And so Jamie asked, so now after having a conversation with your friends, how are you feeling about it? Haileys said, she was really stressed out about during this conversation with her friend. The whole process is just all over the place. I don't want to give up. I'm in this for a reason. It's just going to, take a lot for me at this point. So, yeah, they got some work to put in. I mean, she just didn't give up, but obviously there's some real differences that's affecting the situation. So now it is Clara's turn, and Jamie made a statement saying, hey, we've heard saying the saying slow and steady wins the race, but Clara, you trying to speed things up a bit. So they get ready to show the clip where Clara's talking to her girlfriends about not having sex and not wanting to fall too soon. And, she says she feel like she's waiting around, but she don't want to pressure him and not wanting him to rush into anything. And, it's definitely something that, she says she's emotionally connected to him, and he wants to be emotionally connected when they decide to move forward in the intimacy department, but they haven't. And she said, of course, she just don't understand it all. And I've seen that conversation on social media. What is going on with them? They're obviously doing something. It's just not having sex. So Jamie asked her, is this slow pace of intimacy between her and Ryan making her insecure about the marriage? And Clara said, well, I don't know if it's insecure, but I was in a long-term relationship and it was made clear that she wasn't desired. However, Ryan has clearly made it to her that he desires her. He finds her attractive. He's just taking things slower. And I very much understand where he's coming from. She says she's just a little frustrated because she's attracted to her husband and she wants to have sex with her husband. And Virginia, was asked, who gives the most affection in her marriage. And she says Eric definitely is more affectionate, very clearly. He's constantly reminding her that he's attracted to her and that she knows that he desires her, and it makes her feel good. It makes her feel protected. And Haileys mentions that, she's not the most affectionate person. Have you always been this way? And she says, behind closed doors is one thing, but in public, I'm like, whoa, I'm not trying to make out with you in front of friends and family. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see it. And I don't want other people see us doing that as well. So Jamie asked, is intimacy a big role in relationships, or do you think other things are more important? Clara says, I definitely tend to jump into relationships physically first. And you're like, when it falters, why are we still here? I went into this experience very blatantly saying I want someone who I'm not necessarily going to fall in the bed with on night one. Granted, I will say I have low patience, but it sounded better in theory, and you're like tick tock, tick tock. I mean, it's been 2 days, but it feel like it's 2 months, but we're still here. So they switched up, And they talked about the clip where the guys were having conversation. And this is where we hear Ryan talking about how he's the person that is slow to trust people because I'm trying to avoid the pain of it all. However, he talks about how Clara trusts everybody until you give her a reason not to trust. And he's like, well, why? Ryan is super serious. And that's one thing that Vincent noticed in that conversation. And, Vincent says that, Ryan works at a slower pace. I think it's going to frustrate Clara. So I'm feeling like him holding back is definitely going to be a problem. And honestly, yeah, when you have somebody who trusts easily versus somebody who don't trust as easily, it's definitely going to be a disconnect. So, Jamie asked Clara, what do you think about what Ryan said here? And she said, Ryan and I, our first major disagreement come down to trust. She's the type of person that trusts you from a minute go. I meet you, I give you the leeway to show me that I can't trust you. Whereas Ryan, on the other hand, will not trust you until you give him a reason to trust you. So it's a very different dynamic for sure. And then Virginia had her take on it. And she says, I can see, I can say from what I know of Ryan, I feel like once you have that trust, he's so all in and giving absolutely. But I think he's a little bit more hesitant because he can get hurt badly. And Clara's, her thoughts was, I do think it can make or break a relationship, absolutely, but it's definitely not in our case. But it definitely gives us insight on how each other work and how, we deal with things outside of our relationship. Hailey was asked what was her biggest fear when it comes to relationships. And she says things starting the way that it did, failure is honestly the biggest fear that I have. Once I'm committed to something, I'm committed. I always follow through. I just think that, settling in the end of this and failing is what she's really worried about. So Jamie says, of course, I always say whether you stay married or get divorced, you're not a failure if you learn something about yourself. Hailey agreed with that. She says, like, being in this relationship, even with what I've had learned so far about myself, my feelings were in a box, but this process cracks that box wide open. So she's definitely learning something here. So now it shifts to Virginia, and Jamie talks about how last week Eric had a little chat with her friend regarding some concerns in the marriage. And of course, as we remember, the biggest issue with Eric is her male friends. And he says, and the 8-year age difference. And of course, her friend Cole is like, hey, every conversation, she's been 100%. He's hoping that he felt comfortable. And Eric definitely said he felt comfortable from what we remember. And she asked Virginia, how did she feel about that conversation with Eric and Cole? And Virginia said Cole is literally one of her best friends in the world. I think Eric is starting to definitely feel more comfortable with my guy friends. And it seems to be, of course, it's very platonic. They're not thinking anything crazy. The whole night was amazing seeing how well Cole and Eric bonded. And it definitely made her feel happy. And then, Jamie asked about the fact of the age difference. Do you feel that's going to be a concern? And Virginia says, I feel at times, our age difference is different, but overall, it's haven't been really that much of a concern. And I haven't really seen that on screen either. Hailey is up and she asked Hailey, you and Jake have a bigger age gap than Virginia. Why do you think Eric is finding this a concern and it's not a concern in your relationship? And she said, well, I'm not saying that it's not a concern because of the fact that we are 10 years apart. He acts older than his age. And, I have friends that are older, but his friends are also older too. So it seems like we're reaching a bit. She asked Clara about Eric's concerns. And, Clara says that, the concerns about his marriage to Virginia friends And the guy friend girlfriend thing has definitely been a big weight on Eric's shoulders. So I really think it's amazing that he went out of his way to meet her guy friends. And it shows that he's very much committed to our girl here, Virginia. From what's being portrayed, I actually agree with that, because he did take that extra effort to meet them, to feel them out, and to get to know them. Because he could have just wrote them all off and say stop seeing them, and that definitely wouldn't have been the right way to go. Jamie asked Virginia, can this conversation now be put to rest? And she says, to be honest, I don't think that it's necessarily put to rest. I think with Eric, it's going to be a case-by-case basis just going forward, and it's going to be a slow process. So now it shifts back to Hailey, where we see the clip of Jake talking to Haileys Friend, where there's kind of spilling some tea on Hailey about her being in relationship. And this is where Jake is telling her friends, that they've had some intimacy issues. She's completely pulled back, and my perspective is that she doesn't like me. And, her friends is like, well, she's never have been known to be in a relationship since freshman year of college. So she's tough. And one of the girls is like, can I say commitment phobe? And Hailey was asked, how does she feel about what she heard her friends tell her husband? And she says, hey, Caroline, that doesn't surprise me with her. She knew me from the very tail end of my last bad relationship. I can't say I'm surprised. You do get commitment issues from the long relationship that she was in, because she was in it for 5 years off and on, and he got another girl pregnant. So things really just wasn't great. So it definitely gave me some trust issues. It gave me a few commitment issues, and that's where we are. And honestly, before she get into any other relationship, and especially something like this, she needs to actually process those traumas. So now this is where Jamie asked Virginia and how she mentioned that she had attachment issues because of her parents' divorce. And she asked, has any of those issues followed her into her marriage? And she says, I don't think that they have had a tremendous impact on us. Eric reassures me pretty much daily that he's not going anywhere. Even if I have shoved him away, he's not going. So I'm very thankful for that. And I'm just lucky that he's strong enough to handle me, even if I do push a little bit. And then now it switches up with CLARA about the fact of her living with Ryan and how she's discovered any things, the differences and the similarities between them. And she says she feel like that they have so many things in common. We're big talkers. I've always joked about the fact that they put me with someone who can talk more than me. But the only dissimilarity is that he's very routine, because everybody talks about Ryan's routines, and I'm very go with the flow. So obviously we're finding different things that we have in common and not in common every single day, but we're doing our best to make everything work out and to work to our advantage, and it's amazing. So Jamie says, while most of the spouses are having housewarming parties last week, she talked about how Paige found herself in a very different situation. And this is where they show the clip of Mercedes, Chris, and Paige, where Mercedes is informing Paige that, I know you've been told that we were trying to reconcile and get back together. And this is where Mercedes saying, no, I have no intention of that. And of course, Paige is wondering, from what we heard, why are we getting a divorce if you're not getting back with your wife? And so, of course, this amuses the ladies on the panel. And they were, she asked, what do you think about the conversation about him telling Mercedes one thing and Paige something else? And this is where, Virginia was saying that, everybody needs to be completely honest and transparent. I don't think either of them are getting the most in this moment. She's hurting for both of the ladies and can kind of see, between, they need to see actually between what he's really saying and maybe what's true and what's not true, for lack of a better word. Hailey's thoughts was she wants to also know where Chris was in this moment with what he was saying. He was probably shocked. I don't know what he was going to say when he heard what his ex said. And Clara said that from what she heard, she said this was Chris's idea. And with Chris being there with not having a word to say, It was shock, and don't put yourself in a situation voluntarily when you're so wildly out of control. He did not expect the outcome. And, you know, the thing is that it was, from what we saw, it was a very interesting situation. Because I know some of you guys was like, why did we even have this? You know, we're bringing both of them on. Clara saying that it was Chris's idea. I honestly think it was production's idea, because it always come down to them. It's their show. So it was an interesting episode. We got episode 10 coming up this week, so stay tuned for that. But that was the end of the Unfiltered episode. So let's do our post notification shout out. If you want to be shouted out, drop a comment down below. I will see you and shout you out. So the first one goes to Els F. Thank you so much for engaging in the channel. I really, truly appreciate your comment. And then also Mimi T. I'm glad you enjoyed the recap. Thank you as well. And keep an eye on every time I post so you won't miss anything. So until the next video, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you soon.